About 20 years ago, when I went fishing in a small creek not too far away from where my house is at now, I saw a creature that does not belong in this world. This creature is called the Dogman, and I am with 100% confidence that I saw this same creature with my own eyes. There's no mistaking a creature that looks just like this. Rippling muscles from head to toe, covered in dark fur, and a face half human, half canine. Before I get into that though, let me give you a little bit of a backstory so you can understand how my encounter happened. There is a tiny watering hole that's connected to a small creek that runs in between these mountains, and I visit them often to just go and relax, and sometimes I fish. I probably have visited this spot a few times a week, and for whatever reason, it was usually always dead. It wasn't completely hidden and out of the way. You had to walk off a small trail, about 10 minutes to get to it, but it was a wonderful spot. I've invited a couple of my friends over the course of the years and time to go to that same spot fishing. This time was no different. At least that's how it started out. I was by myself, and all I had was my rod and lures with me. I parked my car, and I walked into the trail a little way to get to the part where I need to walk off the trail. I made it to the watering hole, and as I'm setting up my rod to cast into the water, I hear movement directly in front of me on the other side of the watering hole. I look up, and I'm greeted with two striking red eyes looking dead center at me. Very intense. The first words that came to my mind were, uh-oh. This thing was a hulking beast and standing on two legs. It was using one arm to hold back part of the tree that it was stepping through, and the other part to hold on to another tree that was in front of it. I'm guessing it was coming to the area and just happened to peer right into this little clearing right where I am. The expression on its face read startled and surprised to see me there. I don't think it was expecting to come out of that forest with me standing there tinkering with my fishing rod. It stared at me for a brief moment, dead in my eyes. It didn't really seem angry, and it didn't seem like it wanted to attack me. In fact, I didn't feel any feelings of hostility. It felt more like an animal that had encountered a human being and was still in the moment, waiting and calculating on what to do next. After a moment of an intense stare, it slowly just backed right back into the woods where it came from, and I heard it walking off. I couldn't believe what I just saw. This was back in the spring of 1999, back when nobody really ever had information like they do now, like about cryptids and dogmen in general. I never have or seen or heard of this creature before, and hadn't even really heard of Bigfoot at the time, at least not to my recollection. That whole realm was all new to me. The only experience I had with anything not of this world was growing up. I was fairly certain that the house I lived in was haunted, and I had some pretty severe experiences with that, but never did I imagine that monsters were actually a thing. I probably stood there in shock for a couple of moments, not sure what to do, and not sure what to feel. I wasn't petrified, but I didn't feel comfortable sticking around and pursuing my evening fishing. I had no idea if this thing had plans to come back, or what, so I left. For the next 3 to 4 weeks afterward, every time I thought about that same fishing spot, it would just bring that experience right back to my mind and make me not want to go anywhere. Finally, about 3 to 4 weeks later, I would say I was finally able to gather the courage to come back to that spot, but this time, earlier in the day. It was during the day, and on a day that I wasn't working, so I could afford to come before noon, versus the evening time. It was just as peaceful and quiet as ever, and I stayed there fishing until dusk. After that, I feel like that broke my fear of this creature returning. It is now 2020, 21 years since this incident, and I've still been back to that same fishing spot on and off frequently since then. Sometimes by myself, sometimes with friends, but I have never seen that creature again. I never told anybody about this, and even now there's seldom cryptid and Bigfoot researchers that I've shared my story with. Who's going to believe me that a canine humanoid creature popped out of the woods just to say hi? People want to judge you if you said you had a Bigfoot encounter, let alone a canine creature encounter. I didn't even realize at the time they were called dogmen and were a reoccurring cryptid that would come in the future. Had I ever seen this creature, and if you were to tell me about it now, I probably would laugh at you and say you were making it up. I'm only a believer because of my actual sighting. I've never needed or felt I needed to share my story with others just to feel validated. I 100% stand by and trust that what I saw is a real creature and is still a living, breathing animal nonetheless, no matter how horrifying it may seem. I share this with others because I hope they can find information that I share useful and potentially use it to plot out areas where this animal is or could be. By the way, this all took place in northern Idaho. The Chamberlain Basin, located in central Idaho in the White Cloud Mountains. Adventure awaits if you're a guide or the hiker hobbyist. But if you are like me and had a run-in with buffalo wolves, it's a place you want to stay far away from. Long story short, I do nature and landscape photography and videography. Most of my clients involve stock footage companies as well as some smaller, lesser-known magazines. I travel all around deep in the thicket, looking for some of the best shots and best videos I can get. Much of my work is actually on stock footage websites, but most of my work I sell privately. Before I tell anything about my story, I firmly believe that there is some supernatural quality to these animals. Coming from me, that's quite a big deal. I'm a firm believer in that there's nothing other than this life. I'm not a total atheist, but I'm pretty close to it. But I still consider myself somewhat agnostic. Now, let's ask the real question. Why do I believe there's a supernatural quality to these animals? Well, here's the thing. I'm a photographer, and after the run-in I've had with these buffalo wolves during this journey, I would like to think that I could have gotten a couple great photographs, right? No. This is a perfect example. I'm not sure what the phenomenon is, but there's something going on. The only conclusion I could possibly think of is magneticism, that these animals have a high amount of. I'm not sure how to explain it. The story goes like this. I was hundreds of yards away, taking photographs of these big elk, bull elk to be exact, wandering through this very large clearing, when out of the woods behind them came a pack of 4 wolves, larger than anything I've ever seen in my life. In fact, these wolves were so huge that they were actually just as large, if not larger than the bull elk, and were twice the speed. Before they even appeared, I'm taking snapshots of the elk, because I figured it would be good footage to use, and I had my special 300mm zoom lens. But as soon as these wolves appeared, my camera started acting funny and going crazy, malfunctioning. That's the best I can describe it to you. It was like it had severe water damage or something, freezing and hitting random things. I didn't notice right away because I was in awe at the creatures before me chasing down these elk and literally tearing them limb from limb. I'm tucked away behind some brush in a tree, so I'm not entirely visible to these animals. But not only am I scared because I've never seen these before, but now I'm also freaking and panicking because my camera is deciding to go haywire. I felt like this was my one and only chance to get a picture of an animal nobody has ever seen before. I get it. By now, you're probably thinking I'm totally BSing you completely. I don't expect you to believe me, alright? But what I'm telling you is my truth and what happened to me. It didn't take more than a few seconds for these 4 wolves to close in on these 2 large elk and tear them apart, using their hands just like a person. The whole while I'm in awe, trying to make my camera work, but I keep looking up because I don't want to miss what's going on. This was a rarity in nature. These things were tearing massive chunks of meat off these animals, and in fact it seemed like the elk were being killed so fast, or dare I say eaten, they didn't look fully dead yet. It was grotesque. It was insane and terrifying all at the same time. All of a sudden, one of them looks over my direction, quickly followed by the other 3. They all stop eating and just stare right in my direction. Now I'm beginning to have a severe panic attack, thinking these things are going to descend upon me and tear me limb from limb, like they did that elk. I know they couldn't actually see me because I was hidden behind some brush in a tree, but I wondered if I was upwind and they could smell me. I managed to successfully retreat far away from the area without these things ever moving towards my location. I was still able to keep sight of these creatures while they turned their back to their freshly killed meal. My camera was still rendered inoperable. In fact, for the next 2 days after, I couldn't get it to function properly, and I lost a couple days worth of work. Following that trip, about 200 plus pictures on my SD card became corrupted after that malfunction. I have no way to explain what happened or how it happened. I have never in my life had pictures on an SD card become corrupt or a camera malfunction in the way that it did, and I've been shooting professionally for years. The only other time I've ever heard of such a phenomenon happening is with UFOs and abductions. That's nothing to do with what I'm talking about today, but I've heard of this kind of thing happening. Do I believe that these were alien wolves that I saw because of their size? No. But how does this all of a sudden happen? And second, these things appeared out of the woods and chased the elk. Near the end of my trip, I had an experienced guide who goes to the area ask me if I got a chance to witness some of the largest wolves to ever roam the plains of America. He referred to them as buffalo wolves. He even told me that sometimes they'll stand up on their hind legs and act just like a person does. I never saw that, but he was not joking about their size. There's a reason they're called buffalo wolves, and I never knew they existed. In fact, if I ever brought it up to anybody, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Even Google supplies little information about these same creatures. I feel privileged that I got to witness such an animal living in the flesh, but I'm very disappointed that I lost out on money and my camera malfunctioned. Not to mention the overall experience and time was not worth it. I have no plans to ever go back or set foot in Idaho again.